Hi. So we had to watch the documentary 13, and I'm just going to discuss some facts that really stood out to me. For first off, the United States is home to 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. And hearing that really just put it all into perspective because that's 1 in 4 people. And that is just overall really sad and disappointing. Um, and when the 13th Amendment was passed, even though African Americans were no longer slaves, they were almost immediately brought right back into the system as prisoners, um, making them pretty much slaves again. This was a very big loophole that many people managed to find during this time. And if you go back and read the rhetoric, you will see some pretty harsh depictions of African Americans through pictures and just the overall wording that they chose. We see black people being portrayed as the bad guys, and it says that they were out of control and there's a threat of violence towards women. Um, they even mentioned a story about how a woman jumped off a cliff and died rather than be raped by a black man. To continue with the previous thought, when the movie Birth of a Nation came out, it was a huge event that everyone went to go see. But every time a black person was being portrayed on screen, it was always in a demeaning and just animalistic way. Um, we can hope that during this time, not everyone thought of black people this way, but after seeing this movie, it definitely um, it had to have changed the feeling or the thought that people had towards black people. So if it wasn't bad before, after watching that movie, it's definitely a negative thought now. Something that was widely overlooked in the movie was the very accurate prediction of how racism would play out in years to come. Just with the whole KKK um, movement. Not movement, I guess. I don't know. You get what I'm trying to say, though. It just really makes you wonder how much they relied on the info from the film to restart that problem. If you look at the history of black people and their struggles in this country, the reoccurring theme is the attempt to be understood as more than just criminals. Honestly, this is still a problem to this day when you look at the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that has happened in the recent months. Many people and media have come to focus on just the bad things that are happening at those protests. And we've come to see that whenever these bad things happen, either it involves white people or overall just people that aren't involved with the movement at all, and like they're out of state or whatever, or it happens hours after the people that were part of the protest left. I know that was something that happened in a protest near me. There was a protest probably between like 3 and 6 p.m. and then right at like 6:30, 7 o'clock was when different riots and people were breaking into like storefronts and just creating a mess, and the media took that as what the protest accomplished. Like that was all that happened during that protest. But it was, if you were at the event, it was extremely peaceful. There was no issues at all. There was not even a single bit of problems. But that's all the media talked about. um, and, excuse me. At the same time that the civil rights movement was gaining steam, crime rates were also increasing. With this, it it gave politicians an easy way of blaming the civil rights movement for all the crime, making those that were on the fence about it excuse me, come to be against the movement and have more of a negative view towards African Americans. The prison population stayed relatively the same throughout the 20th century. It didn't go up or go down in any significant way until we got to the 1970s. During this time, Nixon called it a war on crime. In reality, it was really just a war on everyone that wasn't a white, straight, rich man. So that means all of the protests that were going on about gay rights, women's rights, just African American rights in general, all of those movements that demanded change those were being considered crimes, and that was what the war was on. During the Central Park jogger case, Donald Trump was very adamant and even took out a 4-page ad in the paper saying that he wanted to give these kids the death penalty. And I just find this very interesting about how strongly he felt about this and how disgusted he sounded and looked as he talked about it, but yet he has his own fair share of sexual assault allegations and things that against him. So I just found that interesting. And actually the 5 boys that got put into prison for years for that case were later found innocent through a DNA test. And this just goes to show how easily it is for someone to be wrongly accused, especially if they are colored. So it leads you to think how many more people were wrongly accused and never released. Many innocent people are sitting in jail simply because they are too poor to pay and get out. Usually the bail is set way too high, and people just can't pay, so they sit there. In this world, it pays to be rich and guilty rather than innocent and poor. Not only that, but many of those same people are also pleading guilty because the time that they would go to jail for if they didn't plead guilty is just so extreme and overall not worth it. These people are usually African Americans, which is just further informing the world that they are criminals and just extending that stereotype because they're confessing to the crimes right in front of their faces just to get a lesser sentence. And lastly, something that really caught my attention was when, I don't remember who said it, but someone said, "We may have lost the sheet to the KKK, but clearly when you see black kids being shot down, then obviously we didn't cut out this cancer." And this just, something about that really just, I don't even know, but it just, sure, you may not be shouting at the top of your lungs like that you're a part of the KKK or that like just you're a heavy racist person, but your actions and your beliefs may suggest otherwise. So that is all I have.